March 6, 1836. Dawn is breaking over San Antonio de Bexar. Inside the Alamo, a former Spanish mission turned fortress, nearly 200 men have been fighting for their lives for 13 days. They're exhausted, out of ammunition, out of time. Among them is a 50-year-old former congressman from Tennessee, a man who'd been famous before he ever set foot in Texas, a man who told the voters back home to go to hell while he went to Texas. His name is David Crockett, and in a few hours, he will be dead. But the legend was just getting started. This is the true story of Davy Crockett, not the coonskin cap hero of folklore, not the Disney frontier Superman, but the real man, a hunter, a politician, a failure, a dreamer, and finally, a fighter in a war that wasn't even his own. August 17th, 1786. David Crockett was born in a log cabin in Greene County, Tennessee, near the Nolichucky River. His parents, John and Rebecca Crockett, were poor frontier settlers trying to carve out a life in the wilderness. This wasn't the romantic frontier of legend. It was brutal. The Crocketts lost two of David's older brothers to Creek Indian raids before he was even born. Survival wasn't guaranteed. It was earned. David grew up working. By age 12, he was hired out by his father to help drive cattle hundreds of miles to Virginia. He never went to school, never learned to read until he was nearly grown. What he did learn was how to track game, how to read the forest, and how to shoot. By his teenage years, Crockett was already known as an exceptional marksman. Hunting wasn't sport, it was food, and David Crockett could put meat on the table when others couldn't. He married young. First to Polly Finley in 1806. They had 3 children and moved deeper into the Tennessee wilderness. Polly died in 1815. Crockett remarried quickly, a widow named Elizabeth Patton. Together they had 3 more children and tried to build a life on land that kept failing them. Floods, debt, bad luck. Crockett moved his family multiple times, always searching for better land, better opportunity. He wasn't a natural farmer, but he was a natural storyteller. And people liked him. That would matter more than he knew. In 1813, Crockett volunteered to fight in the Creek War under Andrew Jackson. He served as a scout. He saw combat, and he saw atrocities on both sides. After the war, Crockett's reputation as a frontiersman and his natural charisma helped him enter politics. In 1821, he was elected to the Tennessee state legislature. He represented the poor settlers of western Tennessee, people like himself who were getting squeezed by land speculators and wealthy planters. Crockett wasn't polished. He didn't sound like a politician, and that's exactly why people trusted him. In 1827, he was elected to the United States Congress, a backwoods hunter in Washington, D.C. The newspapers loved it. They played up his frontier image, his plain-spoken style, his jokes. Davy Crockett became a character, a symbol of the common man. But Crockett wasn't playing a character. He had real convictions, and one of them would destroy his political career. Andrew Jackson, the man Crockett had once served under, was now president. And Jackson wanted the Indian Removal Act passed. The law would forcibly relocate tens of thousands of Native Americans from their lands in the southeast to territories west of the Mississippi. Crockett opposed it. He stood on the floor of Congress and voted no. He argued it was unjust, immoral, a betrayal of treaties. It didn't matter that Jackson was a hero to Tennessee. It didn't matter that Crockett's own constituents supported removal. He voted his conscience, and it cost him everything. In 1831, Crockett lost his re-election bid. He won it back in 1833, then lost again in 1835. His political enemies used his opposition to Jackson to paint him as a traitor to Tennessee. The Whig Party had tried to use him as an anti-Jackson symbol, and when he stopped being useful, they abandoned him. By late 1835, David Crockett was 49 years old, broke, politically finished, and angry. So he made a decision. He would leave Tennessee, leave politics, leave failure behind. He would go to Texas. The quote is real, or at least it's close. After losing his final election in August 1835, Crockett reportedly told a crowd of voters, "You may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas." Whether those were his exact words, we don't know, but the sentiment was genuine. Crockett was done with Tennessee, done with politics, done with Andrew Jackson's America. Texas in late 1835 was in open rebellion against Mexico. American settlers, Texians they called themselves, were fighting for independence. Land was cheap. Opportunity was everywhere. And for a man like Crockett, it was a chance to start over. He gathered a small group of companions. Some accounts say as many as 30 men traveled with him. Others say fewer. On November 1st, 1835, Crockett left Tennessee. He carried his rifle, which he famously called Pretty Betsy, though that name may have been added by later storytellers. By early January 1836, Crockett arrived in Nacogdoches, Texas. On January 14th, he swore an oath to the provisional government of Texas, pledging to support the independence movement. In exchange, he was promised land, though the exact terms are unclear. Crockett wrote letters home. In one, dated January 9th, he said he was rejoiced at my fate, and that he was in hopes of making a fortune, yet for myself and my family, bad as my prospect has been. He wasn't there for glory. He was there for land, for a second chance, for survival. But fate had other plans. Crockett and his men traveled southwest toward San Antonio de Bexar, where Texian forces had recently driven out the Mexican army. The town was now garrisoned by a small volunteer force under the command of James Bowie and William Barrett. Travis. Crockett arrived in San Antonio on February 8, 1836. He was greeted as a celebrity. The defenders knew who he was, a former congressman, a frontier legend. His presence boosted morale, and morale was desperately needed. Because by mid-February, scouts reported that General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was marching north with thousands of troops. The Mexican army was coming to retake San Antonio, and the Texians were vastly outnumbered. Colonel Travis sent urgent pleas for reinforcements. Most were ignored. On February 23rd, Santa Anna's forces arrived and surrounded the Alamo. The siege had begun. Crockett and the other defenders, about 180 to 250 men, depending on the source, moved into the old mission. They fortified walls, rationed ammunition, and waited. Travis sent out more letters. The most famous, dated February 24th, declared, "I shall never surrender or retreat. Victory or death." David Crockett, now 50 years old, took up a position along the wooden palisade on the south side of the compound. He and the Tennessee boys with him, 12 to 16 men depending on accounts, defended that vulnerable section with rifles and whatever else they had. For 13 days, they held. March 6th, 1836. Around 5:30 in the morning, the final assault began. Santa Anna's forces attacked from all sides, thousands of soldiers against fewer than 200 defenders. The Mexicans took heavy casualties in the initial waves. Texian rifles were deadly accurate, but they kept coming. Within 90 minutes, it was over. The walls were breached. Mexican soldiers poured into the compound. There was brutal hand-to-hand fighting in the plaza, in the barracks, in the chapel. The defenders fought with rifles, knives, bare hands. Most were killed where they stood. David Crockett was among them. But how did he die? That question has been debated for nearly 200 years. There are conflicting accounts, and the truth is, we may never know for certain. Account 1. He died fighting. Susanna Dickinson, one of the few survivors, reported seeing Crockett's body after the battle. She said he was found surrounded by dead Mexican soldiers near the palisade where he'd been stationed. This version aligns with the heroic narrative, Crockett fighting to the last breath. Account 2. He was executed. In the 1950s, a diary attributed to Mexican officer Jose Enrique de la Peña was published. In it, de la Peña claimed that Crockett and a handful of other defenders were captured alive during the final moments of the battle. They were brought before Santa Anna, who ordered them executed despite protests from some of his officers. This account caused enormous controversy. Many rejected it as fabricated or unreliable. Others argued it was consistent with Santa Anna's character and Mexican military records. Account 3. Joe's testimony. Joe, an enslaved man owned by William Travis, survived the battle and gave testimony afterward. He reported seeing Crockett's body lying between the chapel and the barracks, surrounded by Mexican dead. He didn't mention a surrender or execution. So what's the truth? Historians are divided. Some believe Crockett died fighting. Some believe he was captured and executed. Some believe the De La Peña account was altered or fabricated years later to create controversy. What we know for certain is this: David Crockett died at the Alamo on March 6, 1836. Whether he died with the rifle in his hands or facing a firing squad, he did not leave. He did not run. He stayed, and he died. News of the Alamo's fall spread quickly. Remember, the Alamo became a rallying cry for the Texian army. 6 weeks later, Sam Houston defeated Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto, and Texas won its independence. David Crockett became a martyr, a hero, a symbol. But the real work of turning Crockett into a legend didn't happen on the battlefield. It happened in the pages of dime novels, stage plays, and almanacs published in the decades after his death. The Davy Crockett almanacs, published between 1835 and 1856, were filled with tall tales. Davy fighting bears with his bare hands, Davy riding alligators, Davy grinning a raccoon out of a tree. None of it was real, but it sold. By the 1850s, most Americans couldn't tell the difference between the real David Crockett and the fictional Davy Crockett. The myth had swallowed the man. Then came Walt Disney. In 1954, Disney released a 5-part television series called Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, starring Fess Parker. It was a cultural phenomenon. Kids across America wore coonskin caps and sang the theme song. Davy Crockett became shorthand for American heroism, frontier independence, and manifest destiny. But Disney's Davy was a sanitized, idealized version. A man without flaws, without failure, without complexity. The real David Crockett was much more interesting. So who was the real David Crockett? He was a man who grew up poor and stayed poor most of his life. A man who lost elections, who failed at farming, who moved his family over and over again chasing dreams that never quite materialized. He was also a man of principle. He stood up to Andrew Jackson when it cost him his career. He opposed the forced removal of Native Americans when it was deeply unpopular. He voted his conscience even when it hurt him. He was flawed. He drank. He exaggerated his own stories. He wasn't above using his frontier image to win votes. He wasn't a perfect husband or father. He was human. But when he went to Texas, he went for real reasons. He wanted land. He wanted a fresh start. He wanted to be part of something larger than his own failures. And when the time came to leave the Alamo, he stayed. Whether he died fighting or was executed doesn't change that fact. He stayed. David Crockett didn't die to become a legend. He died because he believed in the cause of Texas independence. Or at least he believed in his own future in an independent Texas. And that belief cost him everything. Today, historians continue to debate the details of his death. Was he a hero or a victim? Did he die with honor or in desperation? The answer probably depends on who's telling the story. But here's what we know. The real David Crockett was more complicated, more interesting, and more human than the legend. He wasn't a superhero. He was a man who made choices, some good, some bad, and lived with the consequences. And on March 6, 1836, those consequences caught up with him at a crumbling mission in South Texas. The legend of Davy Crockett is American mythology, but the story of David Crockett is Texas history. The Alamo still stands in San Antonio. Millions of visitors walk through it every year. They see the chapel, the walls, the memorials to the men who died there. And they remember Davy Crockett. Not always the real man, often the legend, but they remember. Maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's time we remember both. The man and the myth, the politician and the martyr, the failure and the hero. Because the real David Crockett, the one who told Tennessee to go to hell, the one who swore an oath to Texas, the one who stood on those walls in February 1836, deserves to be remembered as he was, not as folklore, as history. This is Texas. This is our history. And this was Davy Crockett. If you want more real Texas history, the stories, the people, the truth behind the legends, hit that like button and subscribe to Texas Tales. Because history isn't just about heroes, it's about human beings, and their stories matter.